Okay, so what I'm going to be talking about today is I'm going to go through some points around cloud adoption strategy, and then I'm going to delve into infrastructure as a service in particular and show you some real examples. That's the basic gist of what I'll be covering. So the first thing I want to stress is that what I'm talking about here is very much in the enterprise space, so large organisations. What I'm interested in, what Smart421 are interested in primarily, is we're looking at driving infrastructure as a service, specifically Amazon Web Services adoption in the enterprise space, so big customers, these kind of size customers. One of my colleagues, we've been talking about this internally, one of my colleagues at Smart, Paul Russell, came up with an analogy based on homework. So I assume lots of people in here have got children, or were in fact themselves children at some point. Okay, so we've all been there, well most of us have been there. Trying to get your kids to do their homework, nightmare, okay? So there's kind of three basic techniques, isn't there, for getting your homework done. There's doing it in advance, there's doing it when it's set, and then there's leaving it to the last possible moment and doing it the night before. And I suppose there's a fourth option, really, which is either don't do it, which is either don't do it, or do it way, way too late, okay? Well, I'm kind of wrapping that into the last category. And the same three kind of strategies is what we see in the adoption of cloud computing in the enterprise space. So again, putting the kind of startup community who are really, and the SMEs who typically tend to be more the early adopters, in the enterprise space, these are kind of the patterns I see. And for me, it's really interesting how clear the divisions are in the organisations. It's not like it's a kind of grayscale. There's a few at the top, and there seems to be, and there's some in the middle, and there's quite a lot at the bottom, is my view, who are quickly scrabbling to catch up. So in the kind of in advance category, so if you do your homework in advance, what do you have to do? Well, you have to kind of guess the questions that are going to be set, okay? Think about, well, I might get question 5 on page 10 of the maths book. Okay, so it's for the SWATs, isn't it, basically? It's for the keynotes, right? And it's for the people who are evangelists, the kind of cloud evangelists, who are going to go down that road. So by and large, organisations who are adopting cloud or have adopted cloud computing early, because it's pretty mature now, right? They've probably got burned in the process. They've probably had some pretty scary experiences in the last, 2-3 years, let's say. They've probably come out the other side of that, and they've got some first mover advantage because of that. They've definitely got some competitive advantage, but they've had some pretty horrific experiences, I suspect, on the way, and learned a hell of a lot. In the kind of day it's set category, and this is where I think obviously most organisations are tending towards. So you take some tentative steps into cloud adoption. You build good decision-making models as to say what the applicability of certain workloads are to, platforms as a service or software as a service or infrastructure as a service, and you probably avoid most of the risks, but it's still an emerging area. So you're still exposed to some risk, just like you are with any kind of new disruptive technology. But fundamentally, the organisations who are kind of doing their homework when it's set and getting it on time and in good time, they're still getting a good sort of first mover advantage, a competitive advantage in their particular field, wherever it might be, as opposed to the last category. So what's really surprised me talking to various organisations, not necessarily just our customers, is I've come across quite a few organisations who really are on a kind of almost nowhere in some degree of denial about cloud computing. Or I should say there's probably pockets of desire, if you like, and need, but it's not really sort of surfaced, to the organisation's consciousness. So we've all had that sensation with homework, haven't we, where it's due the next day, and you've got that kind of panicky sensation, you start to sweat a bit, right? And I see organisations in pretty much the same kind of turmoil, maybe in their enterprise architecture teams or their architecture centres. These kind of organisations are also, there's a large part of waiting for everybody else to do it first, which is kind of a reasonable strategy. Let other people, let the other pioneers take the arrows. It's reasonable, but I'm not sure that it's always that conscious a decision. It's more a case of just not tackling it. So organisations, I think, now are in the state of realising that they're missing out on a trick. It's matured pretty quickly, more quickly perhaps than they expected. and they're now kind of looking over the shoulders of other people to look at their homework to try and work out how the hell to do the question, right? So I think the organisations in that bottom category are, some will fail to ever gain that competitive advantage, or they'll be struggling to catch up, and they will, lose out and ultimately maybe go to the wall as a result. That's kind of a melodramatic statement, but they'll lose competitive advantage. It'll be hard to regain. So if you're a big organisation, FTSE 250, let's say, or FTSE 500, or up to that sort of size, then you've probably got some of your own data centres. You've probably got some premises already, probably got two. They're probably within, say, 20 kilometres, so you can do synchronous data replication between them. And that's the state of play that most of our organisations that we work with already have. In addition, most organisations have typically got some kind of third-party hosting. So if you like an outsourced data centre. So for smaller organisations, this is usually all they've got rather than their own premises. They might have a number of these, or they might be procuring certain services from a third party who's hosting them for them. So most organisations have a bit of this going on. And maybe if you ask them first, they go, no, we haven't. And then they go, oh, yes, but we've got blah. Oh, yeah, and there's Fred and there's Barney, whatever it might be. OK, so as well as our data centre and maybe some third-party hosting as well. In addition, so in your organisations, you've probably already got some SaaS applications knocking about. In addition, you've got platform as a service applications. Now, for me, this in the enterprise space, specifically enterprise, so big organisations, this is really the least mature area. So I don't see a lot of adoption in terms of Google App Engine, Microsoft Azure, people writing their own apps based on Azure, Heroku, Force.com. I mean, it's definitely happening, right? And it's a trend, so it's going to happen. But in terms of SaaS and infrastructure as a service, for me, this is the bit that's kind of falling behind. And then, in addition, we've got public cloud. So we're finally onto public cloud as part of our kind of corporate hosting model. So this is the classic, what I'm referring to here is the classic Amazon Web Services or GoGrid or what Rackspace or CSC and all these other vendors offer. And when you start, typically it's connected over the internet, but now the market is moving towards the ability to have a direct connection to your infrastructure as a service provider to take out the kind of internet connection bandwidth latency worries. Okay, and then the last thing I just wanted to show in addition, so as well as public cloud, or really kind of instead of public cloud, there's now pretty mature virtual private cloud offerings. So what I mean by that, I don't know how familiar everybody is with this, but so this is an offering from Amazon Web Services, but I think it'll become the norm. And to be honest, I would say probably 90% of the work we do is now all in the VPC, the virtual private cloud world. So this gives me all the benefits of the public cloud in terms of on demand and I won't go through them all because you've heard that 1,000 times, I'm sure. But it allows me to control, have basically a private set of subnets. I have complete control of the environment. It doesn't have to be accessible from the public internet at all if I choose. And just lets me have basically a virtual private network around my public cloud infrastructure. So I'm still using shared resources, so I still got the benefits of lower cost and on demand and so on, because I'm sharing resources from a resource pool. So I think the reason I show this on the slide here is because for me, those are kind of merging into, it's another slice of public cloud. And really, virtual private cloud for me in the enterprise space is where it's at and where it's going and it's where all our work is. Okay, so putting all those together, this is the combined picture, which I didn't want to just throw up there in one go. Okay. So this is the CTO's Janet and John view of an enterprise's hosting options. Forgive the comedy network diagram in the middle for any network engineers. I was just trying to show basically there's some bandwidth comms glue that glues all this stuff together. Okay. So my point is, I suppose this is aimed at the cloud skeptics. I won't pick on you. My point is that every organisation in 5 years, every organisation we work for in this room will have a percentage of their workload in one of those pots. You'll have X% here, Y% here, Z% here. Right? You'll have a percentage in every bit. So the only question is how much you'll have in each of those pots, not if you'll have anything in those pots. That's my provocation. So for a startup, you're going to have probably 100% spread across sort of some SaaS apps and a combination of public and virtual private cloud, right? You're not going to build your own data center. But in the enterprise world, which is what I'm focusing on today, you've started off pretty much probably 90-10 or something along those kind of positions. So your cloud strategy needs to define how you're going to move from today's percentages, 90, 10, 0, 0, 0, 0, and how you're going to move to your vision state, which might be, 40, we've installed a gym in the other bit, none, whatever it might be, okay? So that's, if you can answer those questions, if you can lay that vision down, then you can define a roadmap for getting to that vision point, okay? It's not just obviously about the percentages. What's interesting is what are the workloads. So the percentage is just a crude metric. The interesting thing is what's the nature of the workloads that you're choosing, or the processing loads you're choosing to move to those various places. So I'm just going to go through what I see today, and then what I think's where it's kind of going, what I can see tomorrow. So the first thing is, and this is so unsexy, right? So unglamorous. It's dull, okay? But it's true, I think. The primary, dip your toe in the water place for the bulk of the room, which is our cautious adopters, is dev environments, and then probably the early test environments, as in the ones that are quite a long way away from production. So functional test. And it's a great place to start because you've got projects, most large organizations have projects popping up and disappearing and getting canned all the time, and there's never enough environments and it's always a constraint. So it's a great fit. Most enterprises have, they have some kind of typically horrible outsource arrangement with somebody to look after their data centers, and so trying to get an extra N servers to host some kind of dev or test environment is just a nightmare. And that's been, so in the work we've done, the principal benefit, the principal payback on the dev test world is just, it's not so much cost, though cost does come into it, it's agility and speed to market every time. It's about the fact that we can ramp up a new environment within, let's say, I don't know, a couple of weeks. And that may sound like a long time, but that's a couple of weeks because it's got, I don't know, custom software installed and, and it's got version control and, the whole machinery, rather than just pinging some virtual machines on. And from their internal data center kind of arrangements, it might be 3 months, 6 months, and it's just a horror show. And also, of course, you've got to commit to sort of capex or to the cost visibility, the cost transparency of doing this on public infrastructure is just so much better. So that's a great benefit. So it's not particularly sexy and glamorous, the dev test bit, but that's what we're seeing. That's what we're doing for customers, is creating those environments quickly for them and supporting them for them. What's transformational is the fact that you can do it for an hour and turn it off, and the cost you can do it at. So what's economically possible now is just, it's just awesome compared with the machinery and sort of heavy lifting you had to get involved in a few years ago. So that's that in the enterprise world. That's where I see large enterprises getting immediate benefit today, and the ones who aren't doing that are absolutely missing out.